So, Heather, of course, it's another week and more Trump scandals. Of course, we will discuss the terrorist attack in New York City and New Jersey, but we'll do that a little bit later in the program. Fortunately, no deaths occurred. Of course, there were 29 injured. And people here in New York, in certain areas, certain neighborhoods are pretty shook up. Others, it's a big city. But let's talk about the other, perhaps, well, frankly, event that could take place in the next 45 days that could very well take more lives, and in many respects is more terrifying than a lone individual who planted a couple of bombs that some of which did not go off, and that is the possibility Donald Trump could get elected president. And let's reserve and talk about the potential scenarios involved in that, because there's a lot of misinformation out there that I know we've talked about at different times. But specifically this week, we have a story about the Trump Foundation. The equivalence of the Clintons having a what is known as a public charity, and Donald Trump having a private charity. This is his foundation, which turns out to be, I don't know, maybe I would call this a slush fund in some ways. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it certainly doesn't sound legal what he's been up to.
Well, from what we gather, there at least certain aspects of what he did would appear to be illegal under the IRS code, and a whole lot of what he did is certainly unethical and downright sleazy, whether or not it was illegal or not. I mean, what we did find out this week was that, I think people probably hopefully have heard by now that this is a private family foundation, which, the Clintons have one of those too, by the way, along with, the big public Clinton Foundation is a big public charity where everything's, the books are open, and it's about people donating to that charity for money to be dispersed elsewhere. The Clinton Family Foundation, which is also open to the public, they're transparent about all the money that's spent in there, unlike Trump. But that's a family foundation that they put their money into as sort of a big, pot of money that they then use to give to charities, around the country and around the world on a personal basis. That's what those family foundations are. That's what Trump has. And normally, it's highly unusual for someone to take donations for a foundation like this. This is for rich people. It's basically a sort of an organizing function for rich people to put their money, their charitable donations, into one place where they can then disperse it as they choose.
They get tax benefits. I mean,
yeah,
we should say
sure.
they get tax benefits, and they
Absolutely.
get their egos fulfilled, and hopefully they do some good.
Of course. I mean, this has been, rich people have been doing this forever. There's nothing unusual about it. And these private family foundations they're a common sort of, they're almost like an organization put together for tax purposes. And like you say, to stroke their egos, they get rewarded and whatever. Well, Trump did that, only he did something really weird, which is that he, since 2007, has not spent any of his own money in this foundation. It's been tracked. He's only spending money that other people give to his foundation, an unusual act in itself, which should be investigated because nobody understands why people are giving him money for this family foundation. But then he goes and spends it and gets credit for it, and they give him awards and tell him how terrific and generous he is, but it's, he's spending other people's money. Well, this week we found out he's not just spending other people's money for, some kind of charitable purpose. He spent it to pay legal settlements against Trump himself and Trump businesses. That is illegal. That is absolutely illegal. And it's $250,000 so far that they've found, and that's quite a bit of money. I mean, I think most of us still consider that to be real money. And the Trump Foundation, Donald Trump himself signed the checks, and they sent it off to settle some legal disputes that he had down in Florida that he had been found guilty of, and the settlement was to give money to a charity in lieu of, say, paying the person directly. That was the agreement that they came to, that he would give money to the charity of their choice. But you don't get to use other people's money to do that. You don't get to use your own charitable foundation to do that, which, by the way, that money, of course, there was a tax benefit to him to use that money as well. That's not his money. He doesn't get to do that. This was supposed to come out of Donald Trump's pocket. It was supposed that, he had been found guilty of a crime, and he was supposed to pay for this. So this has been revealed now. This is on top, of course, of the ongoing story about the Trump Foundation, which is actually quite serious, that looks like there was a serious pay-to-play transaction that he made with the Florida Attorney General, if not a full-on bribe, which it looks like it actually was, to pull back on an investigation of Trump University, that one of those fraud investigations, like the one that's happening in California, and which is now being investigated in New York. It really looks like he used the Trump Foundation to pay her off. And they later kind of found out about it. They realized what they'd done and, paid a fine to the FEC, like, oh, that was a mistake. Well, when you look at all this other stuff about how he was paying his criminal settlement money out of the Trump Foundation, it's kind of hard to believe that was a mistake, right? I mean, this is what he does. So this foundation is just, what you said. It's a slush fund. It's money that other people are giving to Donald Trump for some reason to use to, make himself look better and use that money for whatever purpose he wants. And that is just not the way it's supposed to work. So,
what's interesting,
it should be a big story.
It should be, and what's interesting, of course, is he went out there, and it's and this is an old hat, it seems to me, for the way Republicans run elections, which is they use their own weaknesses and project them onto their opponents, right? I mean, we saw this with George Bush demonizing John Kerry's war hero status because, of course, George Bush didn't want to talk about his war status, I guess, during the Vietnam War. And, within that day, I think of that story breaking, not only did the Trump people react rather testily to that revelation, he went out and was bragging about how he uses what he calls OPM, other people's money, in his business dealings. And it's almost as if he's laying down an excuse or an alibi. Like, things get confusing sometimes but this is all the nature of my business work. But Heather, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about not only the sort of another aspect of the Trump mystique, as it were, in terms of the campaign, but I also want to talk about whether or not a story like that, which will get some but not crazy amounts of traction, what relevance it has in the context of the campaign. I mean, obviously, it has a relevance in terms of the outcome of the election, but what relevance it'll have in the context of the campaign, and if it's not having much, why is that the case? We got to take a quick break. Sam Seder on Ring of Fire. I'm talking to the great Heather Digby Parton.